ultimately voters, if the choice is stability or instability, they're going to pick stability every time, right? That's always the scariest part of slipping into authoritarianism, that authoritarianism is somehow more stable. I think luckily for this democracy in what we're seeing right now is Donald Trump does not ever want stability. He wants constant instability. He sees his ability to gain power by creating unstable moments, and it does keep his base united around him. But that instability is why I think voters have basically been very fickle about him, right? They like some of the things he identifies, like even what he said about the UN. I don't know what it's for. Look, I'm frustrated by how the UN works. The idea of the UN is great. Its execution is not good. In some ways, it's there, but there are aspects of the UN that work really well. It does a great job of feeding the world. A better job than if we didn't have it, we'd have to create a place to do it. And I know by saying it does a good job, I'll have people coming in. It doesn't do this. I hear you. Okay. But it's better than any other entity that we have. And certainly on global health, the WHO is, if we didn't have it, we'd want it. And the fact that we're, as the United States, trashing it and weakening it is actually weakening it for the entire world. It's creating more instability and more chaos, which, by the way, if the world had a vote, they're voting against this, right? They don't like this instability that the United States has created, right? Tariffs is another way that he has created nothing but instability, especially for small business. If you're a small business owner, even if you make your product or do most of your service, your product is quote unquote American made in some form or another. Your supplies are likely still coming from abroad. So, and many folks are finding this out the hard way, right? But the on again, off again tariffs, you can't even budget for it, right? Because you don't know what's on, what's off. Is this country got tariffs of this size today? Well, maybe I ought to try to import from this country. So the lack of certainty. He's upending small business. We all remember this, right? The biggest criticism from the business community during Obamacare was, oh, he's creating instability in the market. And that was, well, I do buy the idea that business doesn't like instability. And Donald Trump has introduced nothing but instability to the financial markets and to the world of consumer products, right? So, and then he's done so this on foreign policy. So the point is that I really believe that this is his biggest vulnerability, and because it's a vulnerability he doesn't know how to address, right? He doesn't know how to preach unity. Look at the Charlie Kirk funeral. You have this incredibly moving and for many people religious moment by Erica Kirk, and then Donald Trump comes up there and says, yeah, I can't forgive my enemies. I hate them. I want them to lose in some form or another. At a moment where he could have been bigger than a politician, he chose to actually get smaller in the moment, and he shrank in the moment. And he thought he was. You heard the uncomfortable laugh in the crowd, but I think that's what it was an uncomfortable laugh. And so I do think it's creating an interesting divide, I think, inside of those that have been responding. I think there are many people moved in a religious way by some of the things with the Charlie Kirk memorial and the aftermath, and there are some that are moved in a politically exploitive way, which I think is where you put Donald Trump and Stephen Miller, who just see his death as an opportunity to go after their perceived enemies, strengthen their hold on certain aspects of the culture, rather than channeling their own inner Ronald Reagan and actually trying to talk to the entire country, actually attempting to persuade skeptical people of his agenda that his style or his ideas are set to supposedly benefit all more than just his base and more than just Americans who live in red states.
There's a reason results matter more than promises. Just like there's a reason Morgan & Morgan has become America's largest injury law firm. For the last 35 years, they've recovered $25 billion for more than 500,000 clients. It includes cases where insurance companies offered next to nothing, sort of shortchanging, seeing if they could get away with it. And Morgan fought back, and they won millions. In Pennsylvania, one client was awarded $26 million. It was a staggering 40 times the amount that the insurance company originally offered. That offer, $650,000, whatever it took to sort of get away without paying. So with more than 1,000 lawyers across the country, Morgan & Morgan knows how to deliver for everyday people. So if you're injured, you're looking for a lawyer, check out forthepeople.com/Toddcast or dial pound law, pound 529 on your cell phone. And remember, all law firms are not the same. So give Morgan & Morgan a look. Their fee is free unless they win. So I think he's I think there's a reason he's pursuing an aggressive redistricting strategy. I think they know that he doesn't have a winning hand. And rather than trying to be a better politician, they're going to just hope they can figure out a way to motivate their base. And if his voters come out, he can mitigate the losses and maybe in a polarized environment, eke out a House majority that allows him to keep both the House and the Senate. Now, I kind of think that this is setting up, it isn't going to be, redistricting can help you in a tie election or a polarized election. But if you're losing by, 6 points in the generic ballot, somewhere 6 to 10 points in the generic ballot, well, it doesn't, your flood wall can't get much, isn't going to be high enough to protect you from that. And so, this will be the difference between Democrats winning 20 to 25 seats in an redistricting environment to 10 to 15 seats in this environment, which still would give them a majority and likely a bigger majority than they had the last time that they controlled the House. So I do think Trump is more vulnerable than people realize. One, two, I think the voters, it's not the specific ideas. I think where the left gets this wrong, right, and where there is a divide inside the Democratic Party is that I do think there are some that are called, supposed centrists or center left people who see it as a tone issue and a temperament issue, and that this is what people want some certainty, and people don't want this sort of disruptive nature. I think some progressives see an opportunity to do what Trump successfully did, was insert a much more conservative agenda into the ecosystem, even though the only reason that wing, that the Republican got power was not because people bought into that conservative agenda. They just didn't like what Hillary Clinton was selling and what Barack Obama was endorsing back in 2016. And just like they didn't like, this is not a case where people thought, oh, I want more of this Donald Trump. What they wanted was sort of what they got in the first term, a Donald Trump with guardrails. There were guardrails inside his own executive branch, thanks to Reince Priebus and Mike Pence. There were guardrails in the U.S. Congress. There were guardrails in the press. There were guardrails in corporate America. What we now have is Donald Trump with very few guardrails, right? That's the point Ed Luce made at the top of this piece. But there's still one entity that hasn't spoken yet that I think their lived experience is going to tell them, I want off of this ride. And that's the American voter itself. So it might sound a little Pollyannish where I'm going here, but I do think a voter's lived experience is going to trump perception. Just like we saw in 2020, right? They didn't like the chaos that he was bringing. Wherever Donald Trump goes, there's chaos in its wake. And especially if people feel like this economy isn't working for them. And right now it's not.